to this forum on a very important issue. When we started to plan this in June, we knew that immigration was a significant issue. We never anticipated a scale-up that would involve masked ICE agents in unmarked cars invading homes, schools, and workplaces. Birthright citizenship seemed like a guarantee, and the only people convicted of terrible crimes worried about denaturalization. So we are grateful to the members and staff of St. Paul's Episcopal Church. This congregation is known for social justice programs. As you may know, they serve breakfast for poor people, and today they have a sign up for free turkeys. So that's the traffic that's going this way and then down into the basement. They also sponsor a group called Courageous Conversations on Race Relations. That group meets right here the third Tuesday of every month. Yeah, that's today. The meetings are open to the public. I have been to several of them. They are excellent. It's not a fluff group. It's a very serious group, but friendly people, and they serve dinner, like you see, every evening at 6 o'clock, and then it goes till about 8. We're particularly appreciative of the members of the Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church and their pastor, Eric Howard, who co-hosts the Courageous Conversations group. As you can see in your handout, your bulletin, we do not permit audience photos and videos. We will find you. The whole point of it is we are videotaping this and we're taking our own pictures. These will be available to the public. We are not going to use any artificial intelligence on our copies of what we do, and we don't want anybody else to have access to that. We are very grateful to have this expert panel, which was invited by Joe Martuccio, and you'll meet him officially in a few minutes. We have not pre-screened what our speakers will cover today. They understand what the League stands for, but they may offer their own opinions, which may not align precisely with our nonpartisan stance. We honor freedom of speech that's guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. So during the program, you are welcome to write any questions on the index cards at your seat. We will have greeters walking through the aisles, and they will collect the index cards and then give them to a very secret group outside here. It's our question and answer group, and they will organize them based on the most popular questions but avoid redundancy. Also, as a bonus tonight, those greeters will offer you bottles of water if you would like those. So you don't have to write a question to get them. No purchase required. But just signal to them the bottles of water over here. Okay. And at the end of the presentation, so starting at 7:30, we will have Joe ask your questions to the panelists. If there's any particular panelist you want to direct a question to, write that on the card. Okay. So, we will begin tonight's program in a special way. League member Rosemary Rubin will read a well-known sonnet written by Emma Lazarus in 1883 to raise funds for a pedestal to support the Statue of Liberty, which was dedicated 3 years later. Just 7 years after that Statue of Liberty went up, a 5-year-old boy named Irving Berlin and his family immigrated from Russia and were greeted by the Statue of Liberty as they sailed into New York Harbor. He became a gifted Broadway composer. In 1949, after the end of World War II, Irving Berlin wrote a melody for the text. You want to step over here?
The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride, from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuge of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Good evening. We want to thank so many people for making this happen, including the folks here at the church, the clergy, the volunteers, The League of Women Voters, League of Women Officers, particularly our co-presidents Diane DiGiantonio, who had so much planning and detail in this, Chris Clevenger, and all the many officers and volunteers who are working so hard tonight to make this happen. We want to thank the musicians, led by Karen Dianchad, who is a League of Women voter, Rosemary Rubin, who read the sonnet, who's the League of Women voter, and the first female president of the Starr County Bar Association. We want to thank the panelists, who I'll be introducing shortly, for their time and expertise, and the audience for coming, and our partners at the media, particularly Karen Cook at WHBC. So, in the words of tonight's occasion, welcome, willkommen, benvenuto, bienvenidos, Wanyin, and Merhaba. You can all tell me if I blew those or not. You're all welcome. In 1951, a beautiful 20-year-old newlywed woman stood on the dock in southern Italy. She was hugging her husband of only 7 months goodbye, a dark-haired, handsome man, and she was about to board a ship to New York City and go past the Statue of Liberty and the words you heard. She made it, and she worked in the garment factories in the Bronx for several months and brought her husband over. They emigrated not only from Italy to New York City, but to eastern Ohio, and had 3 children. This woman planned to go back 14 years later to see her family, but her father passed just a couple of months before she arrived, so that when she hugged her father on that pier in 1951, she did not know it would be the last time she'd ever see him or her in-laws. Her 3 children only got to meet one of their 4 grandparents, and only briefly. That story is common to so many of you in this room and your ancestors. Their 3 children grew up to be a lawyer/elected official, an administrative assistant/elected official, and an optometrist. Forgive me for saying this, but I don't believe we poisoned the blood of the country. At any rate, the stories have changed, and they've changed greatly over the decades. Particularly in the last year. I think we all would agree to that. So, I am about to introduce your panelists one at a time, with special thanks to Lyn Pac-Urar, our anchor, who will be the last to speak. They will each speak individually for several minutes. They're all very talented, experienced immigration lawyers, and we have a very experienced translator with us too. But we're going to start first with the person immediate to my left, wearing a dark dress. Sandra Boogaard is an immigration attorney who's been practicing law since 1996, beginning as a prosecutor in Jamaica before immigrating to the United States in 2002. She's personally gone through the immigration system, and she had law offices in Ohio and New York. She's a member of the Immigration Lawyers Association and Ohio Immigration Lawyers Association. I just met her husband, who's also from Europe, and her passion will show. So, ladies and gentlemen, Sandra Boogaard.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here today. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this, and thank you to the church for also accommodating us on this very important occasion. As you have heard, I've been an attorney for 29 years, and I've specialized in immigration law for about 9 of those years. Before practicing immigration law and becoming a U.S. citizen, I came here on what was called an H-1B visa. That's a visa for professional persons in what they call a specialty occupation. I had already established a life in Jamaica and served for many years as a criminal law prosecutor. But I still remember holding that approval notice in my hand, a single sheet of paper with the beautiful words, approved, welcome to the USA. I am very familiar with the highs and lows of the immigration process. And tonight I want to take a step back and talk about the bigger picture. How the immigration system developed, what is happening today, and what we can learn from history and dispelling some of the myths that might be hanging around us. So who came first to the United States? When we talk about immigration, the simple question is, who was really here first? From all accounts, the first people on this land were the indigenous peoples, long before there were borders or even nations. Then came the Europeans, English, Dutch, French, some fleeing persecution, others seeking opportunity. Africans were brought next, but as slaves, and became essential to the country's growth. In the 1800s, the Irish arrived escaping famine, the Germans fleeing revolution, and the Chinese laborers came to build the railroads, until laws later targeted and excluded them. In the early 1900s, Italians, Poles, and Jews arrived through Ellis Island, greeted by the lady with the torch. After World War II, and especially after the 1960s, our immigration law system shifted again. Racial quotas were repealed, and a family and employment-based system replaced them. Today, immigrants come from every corner of the world: Latin America, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, all contributing to our communities and our economy. So the question many will want to ask is, did the earlier settlers have visas? The visas you guys hear about now that people should be getting? The answer is, there really wasn't such a thing as legal or illegal immigration back then. When Europeans first arrived, the English, Dutch, French, and Spanish, the land wasn't governed by U.S. immigration laws because the United States did not exist. There were no passports, no visas, no inspections. People came under colonial charters, private sponsors, or simply by showing up. If you had a ticket, you had a chance. For the first 100 years after independence, America especially had open borders. Anyone could make the journey to settle here. Even when Ellis Island was opened in 1892, it was mainly a health inspection station, not a visa checkpoint. So when we say our ancestors came here legally, it is important to remember that there were no immigration laws to follow or to break. Those laws did not exist until the late 1800s, beginning with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, and it wasn't until 1924 that the first visa system was created. In other words, immigrant crossing borders without visas today aren't so different from those who arrived centuries ago. Except back then, there were no rules yet written. The laws came later, not the people. When people picture immigration, they often think about the Statue of Liberty. Torch held high, welcoming the tired and the poor. For millions, that image was literal. Ships arriving in the New York harbor, passengers glimpsing Lady Liberty before docking at Ellis Island. Between 1892 and 1954, more than 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island. On the west coast, Angel Island in San Francisco processed thousands from China, Japan, and the Philippines, often with stricter questioning and longer detentions. Others came through the southern borders from Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central America, drawn by families, ties, and work. The statue itself was a gift from France to celebrate liberty, not immigration. The famous poem, "Give Me Your Tired, Your Poor," was added later by Emma Lazarus, as you've heard, as a protest against the exclusionary laws. Lady Liberty today remains an aspiration. It's a symbol of who we want to be. This anecdote comes to mind. One of my very first clients was an 85-year-old woman, and she actually incidentally was from Italy. Her husband had passed away, and she suddenly realized she had no proof of immigration status. No driver's license, no green card, nothing. She had lived here for decades, raising children, paying taxes, being part of her community, but didn't have a single document showing she belonged, and therefore she could not apply for any benefits. It took time and patience, but together we pieced together her story, tracked down all records, and helped her finally resolve her case. When it was finally over, she smiled and said something I have never forgotten. Back then, we just came to live. Now you need papers to prove you've lived. The moment reminded me that behind every immigration file, a story of perseverance, change, and belonging. I believe that is worth remembering. I turn my attention now to how can people who are here or who aspire to come to the United States immigrate to the United States legally. There are pretty much 4 ways that you can immigrate to the U.S. Either through family, where U.S. citizens or green card holders can petition for close family members, through an employment opportunity, where your employer can sponsor you for a job, or if you invest money. We've heard many numbers being touted around, up to $1 million for a gold card. Some invest in businesses and create jobs, but those visas are very limited and subject to quotas. Then there are humanitarian programs, and you might have heard about the refugee resettlement program, asylum for people with well-founded fear of persecution, and the T and the U visa for certain victims of trafficking and victims of crimes. There are other special diversity programs, such as the lottery. There are even lawful doors to immigrate to the United States through your church. If your church decides to petition for a pastor or church workers, there's something called a religious worker visa that can be utilized. People who don't qualify under certain categories have no path to come, and entering or remaining without authorization is very much unlawful. The system continues to be complex. So no, people don't just walk in through the border, skip the line, and get a visa. If someone enters without authorization and doesn't qualify for legal relief, they will be placed in removal proceedings and they will be deported eventually. So what's going on now in immigration law? As you have heard on the news and you have heard here today, so many things have happened. Starting this year, actually, there's been an acceleration of things that have happened in immigration law. There's a travel ban that restricts entry from 12 nations, some of which are Afghanistan, Iran, Chad, Congo, Eritrea, Guinea, Myanmar, and so on. There are also changes in rules for the immigration bond, making it stricter for persons who are detained to be released. There's record levels of detention, over 59 persons in ICE custody, with about 70% of those people with no criminal convictions. There are major fee increases across the USCIS, including for adjustment of status, asylum, and appeals. There's increased border security and apprehensions. Enhanced vetting and screening, rules how social media checks and travel history reviews for applicants are handled. And there's a new citizenship test rolling out in late 2025 that adds tougher civics and English requirements. Let's look at some of the myths that we have heard, and I will see if I can try to dispel some of those. So one myth that we have heard is that America has always welcomed immigrants. The truth is, our welcome has been conditional. Depending on where you're from, it may be an open welcome, and there may be a restriction as it relates to other persons coming from different nations. Myth number 2, past immigrants do just fine without help. In fact, immigrants have struggled deeply, faced discrimination, lived in poverty, and relied on community support before formal programs existed. Myth number 3, it's easy for an immigrant to assimilate. That is also not very true, because assimilation does take time and opportunity. Learning the language, navigating schools, finding stable work, it's a process that an overnight change cannot fix. Another myth we've heard about is that pregnant immigrants come here for anchor babies. Again, there's no such thing. While children born here are U.S. citizens, for now, under the Constitution, that doesn't grant legal status to their parents. A U.S. citizen child can't petition for a parent until they become the age of 21. And even then, many barriers remain. So what can we do as citizens to help immigrants become part of the society? I believe we can offer help in many ways. Inviting them to church, helping to tutor them in the language, giving mentorship, giving someone a ride to the doctor or a ride to a social service, offering friendship, and in general, welcoming our neighbors from across the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. She'll be joining us again for the panel. Can you all hear okay in the back? Is the sound system okay? Great, great. I would be remiss if I didn't also thank some of our vocalists, who are League of Women Voters and Officers, Diane D.G. Antonio, Ken Alsace, Carol Canavan, and of course Rosemary Rubin and our wonderful director here, Ms. Diane Chan. Next, in the white and gray sweater, Barbara Stelea is an attorney whose practice consists of mostly immigration law and probate matters. She received her law degree from the University of Akron and her bachelor's from Kent State, where she majored in political science. She's previously worked as an immigration counselor at the International Institute in Akron, Ohio, before attending law school. She's a solo practitioner in North Canton, and she, like the remaining panelists, will take up some different topics for our education this evening. Thank you, Attorney Stelea.
Hi. I have a soft voice, so if you can't hear me, let me know. I'm going to be talking about a couple things. One of the things is about, so many people talk about what do immigrants cost the U.S. I mean, we hear so much about that. There's a big difference between legal immigration and undocumented persons, or, they used to call them illegal aliens. We don't do that anymore. There's always somehow lumped together to prove a point one way or the other. First, I want to say that undocumented and legal immigrants are ineligible for federal public benefits assistance. Of course, there's exceptions. If in emergency situations, people could be eligible for some types of assistance. But as a general rule, they are not eligible for public assistance. And I know that's something that's, a lot of people think, oh, they just come here and they get on welfare and, and that's not the case. Some studies show that maybe the cost to the government for undocumented immigrants is high compared to what they contribute. But it's not just a black and white answer. Legal and undocumented persons all contribute. They have a positive effect on the economy. They drive job growth. They increase consumer spending. They pay taxes. And a lot of them do jobs that U.S. citizens don't want to do. And even though they pay taxes, many of them, if they don't have papers to work, they never do a tax return, so they're not getting any benefits back either. They're not getting a refund for any of the taxes they paid. But even though undocumented persons are ineligible for public assistance, a lot of them have children that are U.S. citizens. So that's where the distinction becomes a little gray. About more than 1/2 of the households of undocumented have at least one U.S. citizen child. So that child can receive benefits. They go to a public school. They're eligible for school lunches and other government programs. And the other thing, a lot of people, not everybody wants to come to the United States. A lot of them just have to come because because of the war. They're in a war-torn country. They're trying to escape violence, gangs, persecution. And a lot of the people that come were professionals in their own countries. I have people who were medical professionals in their country, and they're now driving for Uber or Lyft or Grubhub because their credentials haven't been evaluated, or they have to go to school to. So it's not just undocumented workers who are farm workers. I mean, these are people who have education, but they had no choice. So they come here, and because they can't do the jobs that they were trained to do, they end up taking lower paying jobs just to be able to feed their families and to keep their family going. So, and then a lot of the undocumented are in lower paying jobs. So then they're not eligible. I mean, they're children because they're U.S. citizens, and they also become eligible for some programs. So that's why, you know, it's not like they just come here and they can get whatever they want, and people are just giving them money from the government. Now, as far as legal immigrants that come here, again, they're not eligible for public assistance once they come here. And anyone who applies for permanent residency, or what people know as a green card, the majority of them, unless they're coming through a job, but in generally speaking, they have to have an affidavit of support from someone in the U.S., either a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. And they're obligated, it's a contract, and it's a legal binding contract, and they're obligated under the law to support that person if something happens. Now, the main thing is, the purpose of it is so that because they're not eligible for public assistance, welfare, any of that, this is like a back, okay, if you can't support yourself, then we have someone who says that they will take care of you so you don't have to apply for public assistance. So, and the obligation only ends when one of these things happen, if they become a citizen. And I'll talk about that next. Generally, it's about 5 years. You can become a citizen after you have a green card for 5 years, unless you're married to a U.S. citizen, but I'll talk about that. If they've worked or have credit for 40 quarters of employment, that's 10 years. So if somebody comes and for 10 years you could be responsible for, not responsible for them, but you've signed that affidavit for them. Unless they no longer live here, maybe they went back to their home country, then you're off the hook, so to speak. Or if they've lost their status and they're applying under a different category or whatever with a new affidavit, then that, or death of either the immigrant or the sponsor. Now, divorce does not terminate the obligation. People, when they marry a U.S. citizen, you probably heard, 90-day fiancé, blah, blah, blah. They marry a U.S. citizen and they come here. That U.S. citizen or permanent resident has to sign an affidavit of support. Okay, so everything's going well, and 3 years down the road, they get divorced. Divorce does not terminate that obligation. So, it's not, I just want to make sure people understand that people, when they come here, it's not like they come and the government's just waiting to hand them money. There are safeguards, and yes, things happen, there's emergency situations, and like I said, in some situations, they would be eligible for some sort of assistance. Some of the other positive effects of immigration is that a very high percentage of immigrants become self-employed business owners, much higher percentage than U.S. born citizens. And, they employ then other people in the United States, and they give them jobs, so they help the economy in that way. Generally speaking, most immigrants are very driven because many of them have left bad situations, gangs. They're looking for a better life for their family. And the majority are not criminals, they're not rapists, and they're not, or whatever other expletive people are called. And they just aren't. They're people who are looking for a better way for their family. And I think we all agree that criminals, we don't want them coming here, and they should be prosecuted for their crimes. And I don't think anyone is either advocating for to allow everyone to come in, because we can't do that either. We can't accept everybody. But the ones that do come, whether they enter as an immigrant or undocumented or applying for asylum, they're looking for a better life. And they bring their cultures, their traditions, their languages, and that's what makes us who we are. And I heard President Reagan, when he was giving his last speech before he left office, he said that someone had sent him a letter and said They love this country so much. And you might have heard it before, but it was something like, you can live in Japan, but you don't become Japanese. You can live in Germany, but you don't become German. But you can live in America, and you can become an American. So I think that just says a lot. I was supposed to also talk a little bit about naturalization, how to become a citizen of the United States. To be eligible for naturalization, you have to first have a green card, be a permanent resident. You have to be at least 18 years of age when you submit your application, and you have to show that you've been a resident at least 5 years, and again, 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. You have to show that you've continuously lived in the or resided in the United States for at least 5 years before you file, and that you've been physically present for half of that time. And you can't be gone for more than 6 months out of 6 months consecutively. If you do, you have to start the process all over again. Your 5 years starts all over. And then you have to show you're a person of good moral character. And that's a very subjective thing here. And it used to be, not used to be, but you show basically, you know what a person of good moral character, you know. They haven't gone to jail, they haven't done this, they don't beat their wife or husband or whatever. But now, more recently, they're putting greater emphasis on the positive attributes or things like, are you involved in the community? Do you take care of your family? What are your ties to the U.S.? What is your education? Do you have stable employment? How long have you been a resident? Have you paid your taxes? And those are some of the questions that are on the application for naturalization anyway. I brought an application here. If anybody would like to see it, it's at 14 pages. It didn't used to be that long, but they ask if you've ever been involved in any kind of terrorist organizations. Do you have weapons training? Do you plan to I think it's on there too. Do you plan to practice polygamy? That's only one of my favorites. Yeah, maybe this. But in any case, they told me to stop. So I do what I'm told.
Thank you, Attorney. As co-president Diane DiGiantonio mentioned earlier, the Canton Area League of Women Voters is 125 years old, I believe now. And they are an extremely well-oiled machine with really conscientious, hard-working, caring volunteers. They're not allowed to endorse candidates or parties, but they seek to, many of you used and seen the voters' guides for many, many years. But beyond that, they seek to educate and inform voters on lots of current issues. Hence, tonight, at our meeting a few weeks ago, when we talked about the Constitution and constitutional law, does it really say that? And we had an awesome turnout, thanks to many of you. This evening, as you know, we are exploring another hot topic because usually we address issues that are on the statewide ballot in the November general election. There aren't any this year. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to invite the community in and hear from caring, educated, experienced folks. And I'm about to introduce another one to take up another aspect of tonight's panel. Julia Villaseñor is a freelance English-Spanish translator and interpreter specializing in medical and legal immigration context. Dr. Villaseñor holds degrees from the Universidad de las Américas Puebla, the University of Akron, and Kent State, including a PhD in curriculum and instruction and an MA in translation studies. Formerly a Spanish and ESL educator, she now works as a medical interpreter at Akron Children's Hospital and with the Hartville Migrant Ministries, and serves as president of the Northeast Ohio Translators Association. So, seated third away from me, to your right or my left, Dr. Villaseñor.
Thank you so
much for inviting me, particularly as the non-attorney of the panel. But I have had a lot of experience either teaching about or actually being part of the process of immigration with my first spouse, actually. Some of what I'm going to talk about tonight alludes to what Sandra and Barb have already mentioned, but from a little bit of a different angle. As Joe said, the stories today have changed and they've gotten to be quite ugly. We would be led to believe that immigrants today are nothing but those criminals and rapists that Barb mentioned, particularly if they come from Latin American countries. Again, it's an ugly atmosphere, but how have we welcomed immigrants in the past? Sandra alluded to some of this. Have we always or ever lived up to the words immortalized by Emma Lazarus? A cursory historical perspective would answer that question, and the answer would be no. Most waves of immigration have been met with severe nativist, a term that is ironic in and of itself, or anti-immigrant attitudes. Most immigrants have been considered incapable of assimilating or called not fit for our society. And they've been said non-fit for a variety of reasons, including language, skin color, customs, and beliefs. Consider the following quote. Quote, "Why should immigrants establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to change us instead of our anglifying them, and will never adopt our language and customs any more than they can acquire our complexion?" Those are the words of Benjamin Franklin from 1751 in response to German immigration into Pennsylvania. As Sandra mentioned, we had our first great European wave of immigration from 1820 to 1860, and that saw an unprecedented influx of immigrants from Ireland and Germany, most of which were non-Protestants. That surge of Catholic immigrants produced a significant anti-Catholic backlash in this country. John Jay, one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, feared that Catholics could not maintain loyalty to the Church and the Pope and still be loyal citizens of the United States. Thomas Jefferson warned that our democracy might not survive them. He feared that they would bring their principles of monarchy to our nation, or if they adopted our principles, it might be in exchange for unbounded licentiousness. In other words, calling into question their moral character. The result of all of this were arsonist attacks on churches, convents. There were movements created as part of this backlash, including one that was called the American Party, or in other words, the No, K-N-O-W, Know Nothing Party. The Chinese, of course, were lured here and starting in 1848 to work on the railroads in California. They were enticed with images of large houses, high-paying wages, and more. One advertisement actually said, quote, "Money is in great plenty and to spare," unquote. But of course, as soon as they got here, they were accused of taking jobs away from U.S. citizens. They became victims of lynchings and other types of violence. Ordinances arose throughout the state of California, preventing them from things like obtaining a business license, marrying a white person, again, issue of race, fishing, of all things. The city of Santa Cruz actually implemented an ordinance against them carrying the stereotypical image we have of them carrying their things in a bag attached to a pole on their shoulders on public sidewalks. Arguments used in favor of the Chinese Exclusion Act depicted the Chinese as racially inferior, lacking sufficient brain capacity. The second wave of immigration from Europe, of course, comes from Southern and Eastern Europe. Again, as already been mentioned, the Ellis Island immigrants that are referred to. My maternal grandmother is actually one of those. They were considered biologically inferior, less capable of assimilation compared to previous waves, and other arguments were promoted based on religious grounds. One historian by the name of Roger Daniels tends to believe that we Americans have a dualistic opinion regarding immigration. But on the one hand, we celebrate past immigrations and immigrants, but on the other hand, we reject its present. Italians were classified as inherently criminal, and their high rate of illiteracy was due to their inherent racial tendencies, not the fact that they were foreigners. Of course, we have a long-standing push-pull history regarding Mexico and immigration, starting with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo on February 2nd, 1848. At that time, more or less 100 foreign-born Mexican citizens became U.S. citizens when the border crossed them. They were promised rights to language, religion, and property. But we were already dealing with those strong anti-Catholic sentiments. Children were forbade from using Spanish in school. Property owners could not defend their rights in courts due to language barriers and, in some cases, lack of official documentation. They were also subjected to forms of segregation, similar to those that existed in the South. With the Mexican Revolution, a push factor, and the need for labor in the agricultural sector, the mines, and the railroads in the United States brought them into the country regardless. And again, the border was not yet closed to Mexican nationals. Those initiatives were first regarding the Chinese, not the Mexicans. However, a congressional hearing on Western Hemisphere immigration in 1928, in a congressional hearing, in an effort to prevent an influx of more Mexicans, likened them to animals who only eat, sleep, and have sex, prowling at night like coyotes, stealing anything they can get. Additional descriptors including filthy children, apathetic peons, and lazy squaws living in jungle squalor, among so much more. But of course, this push and pull went on, and is still going on today. And we saw also the retention and then repatriation of over 400,000 Mexicans, some of whom were U.S. citizens, back to Mexico during the Great Depression. These images that we get of immigrants as being lazy peons, intellectually inferior, etc., are far from the truth of what we experience when we work with immigrants on the ground. They are hardworking families that only hope, as Barbara mentioned, to better their life and the life for their children. I've been at Hartfield now for 10 years, and I've been at the hospital for 2.5, going on 3. I'm amazed at how farm workers, who are much younger than I am, look so much older and have so many health problems compared to me. And that is because the work they do is hard, long hours, and difficult conditions. And that, again, amazes me. I've been there 10 years now, and it never stops to astound me. But I also have anecdotes from families that I have met at the hospital. For instance, family number one, they are a mixed immigration status family, which is not uncommon. The dad works at night and cares for the kids during the day. And the younger children in the family, the dad who works nights and cares for the children during the day,
is documented. But the mom and the oldest child in the family is not. She works, one of them works at night, one of them works the day, taking care of the kids. They have tried to resolve their immigration status repeatedly, but have so far been unsuccessful and are facing deportation potentially. Meanwhile, their oldest child has just been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia and has barely started what will be 3 years of chemotherapy. If he and his mom are deported, the fathers indicated they will all live together. But if they do, they know that that child will not survive. Another patient that comes to my mind is an adolescent girl who has been treated for a genetic disorder her entire life and is overall doing well. When, at the end of her most recent appointment, the provider asked if she needed anything else, the patient broke down in sobs. As it turns out, she and all of her friends at school here in the Canton area, as a matter of fact, find it impossible to focus on their studies or to get any sleep for fear of losing their undocumented parents. And then I've also worked with numerous people coming from Venezuela on foot, and their stories are horrendous. So that is so much fun.
Housekeeping matter, you were asked earlier that if you had any questions, you could write them down on the index cards provided. If you have them finished, or as you finish them, please hold them up in the air, and one of the volunteers will come by and gather them from you. Following our final panelists, we'll have some questions and answers from the whole panel, from the audience. Uli and I were talking earlier. I was looking through some of my father's paperwork from the 1950s, and when it asked for his complexion, the word was swarthy. I had to look it up. Our next final panelist is a solo practitioner specializing mainly in family immigration, naturalization, and religious worker cases. She's assisted families with foreign adoptions from Romania and Guatemala. Her love for immigrants started with her own family, who immigrated from Romania. Prior to graduating from the University of Akron Law School, she was an immigration consultant for the International Institute in Akron. She's married to an Orthodox Christian priest. They have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. I go back a long way with Lyn Pac-Urar. We all do. We have helped plan. She was marvelous. Her committee planned wonderful naturalization ceremonies for many years at the Palace Theater, took them to various high schools. People could see the pride of citizens being sworn in, and everybody left with tears in their eyes. And for various reasons, they have come up and will come up. They ain't happening right now. So with that, thank you, Anchor Pac-Urar, Attorney Pac-Urar. I give you Attorney Pac-Urar.
Okay, all right. So, a quick thank you to Joe. Thank you to our panel, Sandra and Barb and Julia, who we go back to the International Institute many years ago, and have still stayed friends and commiserate about the current immigration status in our country. You've heard from the panelists about the history of immigration, how to naturalize here, what's happening currently in our country and in our county. I'd like to tell you what some of my clients and friends often ask me. Why don't people just come here into the U.S. legally? And don't American citizens who are married to immigrants have those immigrants automatically become U.S. citizens? Or aren't those spouses allowed to stay here indefinitely? Sandra mentioned some of these things, and I'm not advocating for illegal immigration, but
as Sandra said, there are really only 4 big buckets that you need to fit into if you want to become a permanent resident. A permanent resident is the same thing as an immigrant and the same thing as a green card holder. Those are all synonymous. So first way is through family immigration. And so for instance, if you are married to a U.S. citizen, and I see some of my friends out here who I know are married to U.S. citizens, you have a legal way to stay here and to obtain a green card. But it's not easy. It doesn't matter if you come from Canada, Mexico, Turkey, Spain, Romania, the process is the same. The U.S. citizen's spouse files a relative petition and does the affidavit of support, which Barbara talked about, and the intending immigrant completes a 24-page green card application, which back in the 80s was, I think, 2 pages. They have to go through a medical exam, and they have to gather sufficient evidence of the validity of their marriage. After all that's submitted, they go to immigration, to USCIS in Cleveland, which is United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, and they have an interview there. Sometimes they separate the individuals, sometimes it's together, and they check to see if they believe that this is a valid relationship and if the person qualifies for a green card. So that's pretty easy. If you've made a legal entry, you can go through this concurrent processing. But if you're considered undocumented, you cannot file for a green card in the United States. So after your U.S. citizen spouse has an approved petition, then the intending immigrant has to go back to their home country, go to the consulate there, and apply for an immigrant visa. Not a big deal, right? Well, it is a big deal because most of the people who are here and undocumented have been in that status or non-status for over a year. So as soon as they leave the United States, they trigger the 10-year bar, which means they can't come back for 10 years. So there is a waiver, but it's only for qualifying relatives. So if you're married to a U.S. citizen, your spouse is a qualifying relative. Your children, American children who are here, are not qualifying relatives. And you have to prove that if your spouse cannot come back immediately, you are going to suffer extreme hardship. This isn't just, I miss him, or gosh, we're down to 1 paycheck. It's a high bar. And if the application isn't approved, then you, the American citizen, has to decide, does my spouse leave me for 10 years, or do we all pack up and go to a foreign country, which we maybe never visited, we probably don't speak the language, so that's a problem. If you are applying for your spouse, unmarried, children under 21, or your parents, they are immediate relatives, and there's always a visa available. But if you want to apply for sons and daughters over 21, or brothers and sisters, they fall under the priority system, and that's determined by the dates of the visa bulletin. So this is a visa bulletin, it comes out every month. And it's like when you're at the deli and there are 50 people ahead of you, you have to take a number. No number, they're not going to wait on you. Same thing here. Once your relative files a petition for you, on the date that it gets filed, that becomes your priority date. And you can only apply for a visa once your priority date is current, or they're working on that date. So for instance, I have a client who applied for her brother in 2011, 14 years ago this month. Her brother's still overseas. Best case scenario, the priority date in the visa bulletin for that category is March 2009. So we have to wait for that visa bulletin to gain time. Sometimes it moves up a month, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's not at all, sometimes it regresses. So when clients ask me, well, when will they be able to get here? There's really no way to tell. There's also a way to stay in the United States through employment. And Sandra mentioned that. It's easier if you're almost like a Nobel Prize winner. We let those people in. And the date's current, except if you're from China and India, and those are backlogged. There are other categories of employment, but those also require an application through the Labor Department, which is harder. As mentioned, I do file religious worker visas. There's a shortage of religious workers, but there's also a special application for religious workers to allow them to stay temporarily for 2.5 years and then with an extension. The problem is their spouses can't work. And most churches don't pay a whole lot. I know that from experience. So there's now a backlog. There's another process where they can apply to stay permanently, but again, that's through the Visa Bulletin, and that is currently backlogged about 5 years. So the problem is they're going to run out of time. Their spouses are going to kill them because they can't work. Their kids, are getting older. They need to go to school, to colleges, and it's just really a tough situation. Another avenue is through asylum, and you know that as of January 25th, that avenue for asylum has become impossible at the southern border due to the executive order citing an invasion. So those people who had scheduled hearing dates were turned away, even if they followed all the rules and did what they were supposed to. The refugee program is being cut down to 7,500 for this year, down from 125,000. Diversity visa lottery, we talked about a little bit. There were over 20 million applications for 55,000 visas. So what can we do to improve the life and the law for immigrants? We can advocate for immigration laws that are fair and that will help resolve some of the backlogs and some of the other problems we're seeing in immigration. The American Immigration Lawyers Association has many suggestions: hiring more Customs and Border Protection officers and asylum officers, expanding orderly legal pathways, reducing backlogs, expanding the availability, of the temporary worker programs, and working with the United Nations and Mexico to manage migration, and funding alternatives to detention that are more cost-effective and humane than jail. Besides advocating for these changes, we can advocate to stop people being deported to countries or continents that they have no connection to, and then having them returned to their home countries where they were fleeing persecution in the beginning. Also stopping courts from dismissing asylum claims without having a hearing on the merits and not providing asylum seekers time to find an attorney. What can you do? You can help your neighbors. As Sandra said, I have a quick example. You can learn their culture. My husband had a prof who was telling about when he came from India. He was an assistant professor. He came on the train. His boss met him at the train station and said, "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" He said, "Yeah, I'm good, no problem." And the boss said, "Okay," and went home. And this poor man, of course, had no place to stay, and he wondered for the next 3 years what he had done to offend his boss, because in his culture, you were asked at least 3 times and had to refuse before they really believed you were okay. So, we can also be a resource for immigrants. Sometimes you can't drive them around or take them to the doctor's appointments, but you can be a resource. You know so many things. You know the system. And that's all I can say.
Thank you, Attorney Pac-Urar. Your brochures contain
much larger biographies of four compassionate, caring, experienced, wonderful attorneys, and their contact information. You also have some other paperwork that help us get receipts. All right, thank you, panelists, but you're not off the hook quite yet. We have a number of questions. I'll try to just ask them as they come. My daughter is married to a green card Canadian. He goes back to Canada frequently, and my daughter worries he will not be allowed to re-enter the United States. Is she properly concerned? Rest.
Did you say she's a resident?
My daughter is married to a green card Canadian. He goes back to Canada frequently and worries he will not be allowed re-entry. Is she properly concerned?
Normally I would say no, but in this day and age, I mean, if they don't have any criminal records, they don't have anything like that, I'd say probably they're okay. I don't guarantee anything. I always tell my clients, it's no guarantee. Because we've all seen the news, we've all seen things happen, and we don't know why. But I would say probably, in my opinion, it's probably they would be okay.
I think also
Our Immigration Lawyers Association also put out a handout for permanent residents traveling outside the United States. As Mark said, normally if you have a criminal record, like, oh, no big deal, you can't stay more than 6 months, but it should be okay. But now, they look at your social media account, they can look at your phone.
So, I just talked to someone last week who said that these were Canadians that lived in Canada near the border. And they said that they used to, their regular routine, they worked near the border. Some of them might have worked in, I don't know if they worked in the US, but I know they used to come and shop in the US because things were cheaper. And it was part of their normal routine, always going in. And they were at the border, and they were asked, do you agree with Trump's policies? And they said, not really. They have been banned from entering the U.S. for 2 years.
Thank you. This is one of our ICE questions. If a U.S. citizen is detained by ICE, is that an immigration issue or a civil rights issue? What type of attorney should I contact?
So, if you're detained by ICE, it's absolutely an immigration issue. There can be other issues as well if there are criminal matters associated with your detention. And when I say criminal matters these days, I'm talking as simple as a DUI, I'm talking something as simple as a traffic offense. You may need multiple attorneys in that situation. But once you're detained by ICE, based upon your immigration status, it becomes absolutely, you're going to be needing to look for an immigration lawyer, a very good one. And so, mostly, it's immigration, and depending on what the reason for the detention is, it could be bordering on other areas of law.
Thank you, Attorney Blair. This is we're going to have to be brief, even though I know we can't be in answering this one. Why do ICE agents wear masks or face coverings when they're rounding up people? Is that legal? It feels very Ku Klux Klanish, and I find it disturbing.
Maybe I should follow up on this one too. Well, it's said by a great orator from the United Kingdom Courts of Appeal, the devil himself knows the heart of a man. And to be honest with you guys, why they wear a mask, that's something that's left to be seen and discussed by them. But I could only offer, an explanation of what I think is, they know that a lot of the things that they're doing are borderline illegal, the way they handle their events, and you guys have seen it on TV. and so to protect themselves, they have their identity, so that repercussions won't be directed at them. That is my opinion. It's not legal, of course it's not.
It is scary, thank you.
It is scary.
It wasn't lost on me watching one of the many videos from the news last week seeing Hamas standing next to folks who are about to be released with mask faces. This one I think we can answer pretty quickly. As an immigration attorney, do you have to pass special tests or be certified in any way by the federal government?
To deal with immigration?
As an immigration attorney, I guess the title.
Yeah, there's no special, everybody when you finish law school, you don't specialize in anything. Anybody, you kind of take an area that you are interested in and you just begin to learn more about it and become more specialized.
Yeah, there isn't a certificate.
Yeah, there's no special certificate.
There's lots of CLAs that we have all gone to, and again, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which most of us belong to, is just a wealth of information and keeping us every day on track.
Thank you. Many DACA immigrants currently have no path to citizenship except marriage. With the current climate, how does a married DACA individual safely, legally begin the path to citizenship?
So,
Go ahead.
So for those of you who don't know, DACA means Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So that those are individuals, youngsters who are brought to the U.S. by parents through necessarily no fault of their own. They can apply for this benefit from the U.S. government, which, even though it's not a visa, it does allow you to stay here and be protected during the time of your DACA. So can DACA individuals become U.S. citizens? It all depends upon how they entered. Did they enter lawfully or did they enter through the border without inspection? Because you can enter lawfully but still overstay and then become unlawful. So if you enter lawfully and you're married to a U.S. citizen, then you can absolutely apply for the green card, as my colleagues have said. On the contrary, if you have not entered lawfully, you would have to return back to your home country and apply for what is called a waiver before you're able to come back. Some DACA recipients, though, can apply for what is called an advance parole, and this is like a travel paper that allows them to leave the country and return. If they do apply for that travel parole and they're granted it, they can come back to the United States, and at that point they're admitted lawfully. And then that allows them to transfer their status from being a DACA recipient. Now they're admitted lawfully, and they can apply for a green card and ultimately become a U.S. citizen. Because many of you may or may not know that the status of being a legal permanent resident is different from being a citizen. Becoming a citizen is the later stage, which takes 5 years or 3 years, depending on if you're married to a U.S. citizen. But yes, they do have passed.
Thank you. I don't know if you heard WHBC this morning, but Attorney Boogaard was on and in a very short amount of time passed on some really good knowledge. I don't know about you, but I'm learning lots tonight. And there's not a billable hour among them.
Thank you for the pro bono education. This is appropriate considering where we are. What is the current law about ICE entering churches to get undocumented people?
They're allowed, aren't they? They're allowed, aren't they? Aren't they allowed? I think they're allowed. They are allowed.
They are allowed. And in fact, there was a recent executive action.
Schools and churches.
Schools and churches are now open season.
Hospitals?
Yes.
I'm wondering what happened. Remember that old movie with Lon Chaney, The Hunchback of Notre Dame? Sanctuary! Sanctuary! I think that would still apply, but sadly it doesn't. Is H.R. 48393, also known as the Dignity Act of 2025, a good template for solving some of the key immigration issues our country faces?
What that is. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I don't
So
know.
the Dignity Act, it's a recent thing. pretty much it allows people who are here in whatever form to have a path to lawful status if they follow certain rules, pay taxes, pay a fine, etc. So yes, it's a step. It has not been implemented yet, it's still a proposal. But if it should become implemented, then absolutely, that would be helpful towards many persons who are here in unlawful status.
Compassionate question. Is there a legal way to shelter immigrants in one's home? If not, to shelter them anyway? Any advice?
We have had an underground railroad in the past.
Yeah. Well, that might speak for itself. This has to do with quotas, I think. How many immigrants are permitted to enter the U.S. annually from Mexico or Latin America? Is there a total of all immigrants each year? I'm assuming this is quota related.
Yeah.
You have those numbers here then?
225. I remember like 225,000 immigrants total. But that doesn't include, again, your immediate relatives. And I don't have any other statistics on that.
Yeah, because if you're an immediate relative, like she said, a parent or spouse or child of a U.S. citizen, there are no quotas. So there's as many as there are, they can come. There's no wait.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We were talking about this earlier, and I think it sort of answers itself. Is it a good idea for all citizens to get a passport card to carry in your wallet or purse to be able to prove your citizenship at any time? Would you recommend this?
Yes.
Yes.
I have, something just happened this yesterday. A former client of mine became a citizen after a long process about 6 months ago. He's from Honduras. So he's Hispanic, he looks Hispanic, and he had a friend who had an immigration hearing in Cleveland. He had lived in California, the friend, and he was applying for asylum. He entered the country, he applied for asylum as soon as he entered, like he was supposed to. He moved to Ohio, so now he had to go to a hearing to set the date for his asylum trial or hearing. So he went to before the judge. He did not have an attorney with him. He went before the judge, and the judge looked at his papers and said, "You're okay. We'll set a hearing date for March 11th, 2026. You're free to go." He walked out. ICE picked him up. And the friend that took him, like I said, is an American citizen. But they took the gentleman, and then they looked at him and they said, "Oh, how about you?" And he said, "Well, I'm a citizen." They said, "No, you're not." And he said, "Yeah." And his wife said, "Take your passport with you." So she took his passport. And they took the gentleman, and he kept saying, "Where are you taking him?" And they said, "It's not your concern." They took him away. Finally, the wife called me today and said that he finally talked to him, and he said he showed the people from ICE that he had a paper from the judge, and the ICE agents told him they aren't letting anyone go that has been given an extension by a judge. They are taking all of them. That was what they said. And he did not have an attorney. He didn't ask for an attorney. His family's all in Guatemala. So he signed a paper, and they're sending him back to Guatemala. So, yes, take a passport with you, or a copy of it at least, or take one of those cards.
And I think it has become well known that if you go to these interviews or these court hearings, if you're not represented, you're picked up automatically. People are being picked up all the time.
Every time I go for an interview with clients, I'm nervous that if I didn't know about something maybe that they had done, or for whatever reason that they're going to be waiting for us when we walk out the door. It's just, it's horrendous.
Yeah.
It's just horrendous.
I've had clients call me, former family members that have adopted from Guatemala and Romania, and they're afraid, and they say, well, what should we have? I said, take every document that shows your child is a U.S. citizen. These kids have been here 20, 30 years. They're U.S. citizens. They've got jobs. They've got degrees. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I had somebody come in yesterday. He's been here since he was 6. He was adopted in Guatemala. He said his parents passed away. He doesn't have any stuff, any papers. I said, did you ever have a green card? He said, yeah, I remember I had a green card. And he found a copy of the paper, his initial visa when he was coming, which shows that he came in under the IR3 category, which, so he did have a green card, but he said, I'm scared because he says, I've voted, I've lived here all my life and nobody ever asked me anything, but I'm nervous now. So, yeah, I mean, and he's lived here, he's probably in his 30s, so he was here since he was 6 years old. He doesn't know anything else. He doesn't speak Spanish. He doesn't, he said, I can't go back to Guatemala, So, yeah, it's...
Before we ask the last related question to adoptions, a point, and maybe one more, we'll see, a point to be made here, and we made it at the Constitutional Law Forum. We don't endorse particular parties or candidates, but who you vote for, these are federal matters we're talking about. Yep. Who you vote for Congress, for the Senate, for the White House, matters.
Yes.
Because they choose the judiciary. They pick and advise and consent on federal judges, district court, courts of appeals, Supreme Court. Who you vote for matters. So we really appreciate the knowledge we're getting tonight and the fact that you're here, you're concerned, and you're conscientious. Speaking of which, another conscientious question, bouncing off of what was just said. As a U.S. citizen, can I adopt a child who entered the country without inspection?
Probably not, but I have an expert who does adoptions now through The Hague, and I could give you their name. But Sandra, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
So, yes, there are ways to do it. So when you adopt someone under immigration law, the adoptee, being the child under 18 years old, has to be living in the United States for 2 years. And children do not accrue unlawful precedence, strictly speaking, under the law. So there are ways to do it. You just have to be pretty strategic, work with an immigration lawyer, somebody who knows about adoption, and it's possible that it could be done.
Yeah.
I think our last one before we turn it back over to Co-President Antonio. Two more. Depends how long this one takes. As we all know, there was an attempt at a bipartisan bill not too long ago on immigration that was thwarted. The question here is, what were the key elements of the bipartisan immigration law that was not brought to the floor of the U.S. House last year? If any of you are familiar with any of those, fine.
Border protection. Oh boy, there was a border protection for sure, and I can't remember the other ones. It seems like ancient history.
I know. A lot of it had to do with, I know a big part of it had to do with workers who are here, even if they're undocumented. There was a process to streamline those workers. That was a part of the bill. There was also something that related to children that was intending to be streamlined, and things along those lines. But, that bill was thwarted, like Tony said, and I don't know when it will resurrect itself. We can only wait and see.
Are there any other questions? I think the few that I have left in my hand have been answered.
Oh, so you don't have time for another. Okay.
Some of these were a a little bit redundant, so we're doing our best to get it in with our allotted time.
I'm just looking for statistics here, like how many people overstayed visas. Do you guys know that? Okay, here's this.
Thank you, Diane. Ooh, good one. What is the citizenship status of persons from U.S. territories?
They are U.S. citizens. They're considered U.S. citizens. That's including Puerto Rico, Guam, etc.
Wow. Quick and easy. Thank you.
Unless you're Bad Bunny.
Unless you're Bad Bunny.
I'm going to turn it back over to Co-President Antonio. Thank you so much, panelists.
Thank you all. This is more capacity crowd than we had ever imagined. Great to see this interest in Canton. Thank you all very much. A couple of things. You are probably sitting on a survey form. If you can gracefully hold that into your hands. We really care about those. We counted them from event to event.
Are we meeting enough?
Yes. Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear now? Okay, those of you who have surveys, which is everybody, please fill them in and hand them to the league volunteers as you go out the door. We really count these and track them, and we appreciate your comments on that. Secondly, we have a bonus. Mary Lynn provided a list of several naturalization questions. It occupies 11 pages. We only printed 2 on both sides of each sheet. See how well you and your friends can do on those naturalization questions. Finally, our security folks are available to escort you out to your car this evening. So they're the good-looking people. They're the good-looking people at the back of the room, and feel free to ask them to escort you if you prefer. Again, thank you all very much for coming.